Hi everyone, welcome to another Hatton's Model Railway SkillsCast session, and today I'm here for all of you beginners to digital command control. It's quite a bit of a tricky learning curve with getting going in DCC, but I've got some of our top tips that we can share with you today to really make sure you are hitting the ground running, learning some of the basic skills you'll need, and starting looking at some of the more advanced features and advantages of DCC too. So, as ever, please do put your questions in the chat and I'll try and answer as many throughout the stream. But otherwise, I've got a selection of top tips here for you today. They'll all be appearing on the screen as well as me discussing them. So feel free to take notes of any that you may find useful. Now, the first one I really want to cover is probably one of the most important, and it's making sure that you put the decoders the right way in your locomotives. It sounds quite obvious, really, but you can cause damage if you put the decoders into your locomotives incorrectly. Sometimes it can appear that there's more than one way for them to be put in, but I'll show you a couple of simple little tricks to make sure you know you are doing it fully correctly. So here in front of me, I have a 8-pin locomotive chassis with the 8-pin decoder socket that you can see here. I've taken the blanking plate out of this, so it is fully ready to fit, and we can put that decoder in either way. As you can see, we've got 8 pins on the bottom of our 8-pin decoder, which will sit in absolutely fine that way. And if we turn it 180 degrees, it will be absolutely fine fitted in the other way too. So how do we know which way is right? Two really useful little ways, and I'll show you them now. On the circuit board, you'll often find that the manufacturers left a helpful little indicator showing one end of the socket rather than the other. You can just about see on this socket here, I'll move the wire out of the way. If you look towards the top there, you can see a little, bring it into the shot. Can you see the arrow on the bottom left of the socket there? Just about make sure that comes in right for you. Just on the top right there, sorry, you can see that little arrow just in front of my finger, and that indicates that is pin number 1. So we know that the first pin will have to sit in there, and it's now at that end, so we've got it ready. But how do we know which end has pin number 1 on the actual decoder itself? As we said, it does fit in both ways. We have to really make sure there that this is going in correctly now, and the best way to be able to tell that is if you look at the wires coming from the decoder itself, you'll see that they're all different colors designating different items. So some of them control the power to the motor, some of them control the pickups to the track. Extra wires coming off may control other accessories and lights too. But the one we're looking for is this orange wire here, heading right up into the corner, as we can see. And the orange wire will always be your number 1 pin on an 8-pin decoder. So then we can match up the orange wire with the little indicator on the board, slot that in, and then we know that we have that decoder in exactly the way that it should be. So what about if your loco doesn't have a little indicator on the board? Maybe the manufacturer's not been that helpful in giving you a clue. Don't worry, there's still some options. If we look at a locomotive, as we have here, you'll often find that that number 1 or the indicator is towards the front of the locomotive, whether it's a steam, diesel, electric, multiple unit, you name it, it will be towards the front of that particular loco. So again, the orange wire being the number 1 wire would be at the chimney end of the Hatton's P-Class in an 8-pin loco, as you can see there. That changes slightly for 6-pin locomotives, and I'll just show you a little picture here. You can still see there that the indicator is picked out on the decoder that I'm fitting, as well as the circuit board that it is being fitted into. So you've still got that really helpful little indicator, and you can put that decoder in 2 ways. But again, you may find that you have issues if you fit it incorrectly. Fortunately, most of the issues you'll find is the loco simply works in reverse. But with some decoders, it can actually cause damage to the decoder. So if you are fitting those locos up, do make sure you followed that little guide, made sure you look at the indicator on the circuit board there, and made sure that the orange pin matches with the number 1 pin that you have on your locos. So we've now got the decoders in absolutely fine. One little thing we should have checked just beforehand on the decoders, and this brings me to my second point, is whether they are insulated or not. And as you can see here, we've got two types of decoders. We've got the Hatton's decoder and the Hornby 8-pin decoder. I'll just put those so you can see them a little better. You'll see on the bottom decoder, you've got the full circuit board revealed there with all the bits and chips available, whereas on the Hatton's decoder, this is covered in a fine layer of shrink wrap. This will protect it from short circuiting against the chassis on your locomotive and again causing an electrical fault. So if you are putting in a decoder that's not got an insulator like the Hatton's decoder that you see here, you want to make sure that you put a thin layer of electrical tape around that. You can also use sellotape out there. I wouldn't really recommend it, but you certainly can give that a try if you wish. But just a thin layer of electrical tape to stop that shorting out on any parts of the chassis that it may come in touch with. So that is my second tip, just to make sure that either your decoder is pre-insulated, or if you're buying an uninsulated decoder, such as Hornby's sound decoders or the Hornby 8-pin decoder that we see here, just to make sure a little bit of insulation's on there so you won't have any issues at all. So we've talked about the decoders, we've talked about getting those installed, so we're ready to go. But surely, if we have more than one locomotive, how do we change the address? How do we look at changing that? What are the advantages of doing it? Now, this is really where digital operation opens up. Each little decoder can have its own unique ID, so you can send a control signal purely to that locomotive. You can then have a locomotive sat on the same part of the track, as we could see here, and only that locomotive would operate if we give it a different number, and of course it is an address on there too. So you can assign that. It is slightly different on each type of controller, so do follow your particular instructions in the controller, but a lot of them cover that very early on in the instructions to make sure that you can assign that. There's two types of addresses that you can assign though, and it's really up to you as to which method you go for, but I thought I'd give you a bit of info behind both. You can either have a short address or a long address, and they are pretty self-explanatory, really. A short address gives you a short series of numbers that you can have, and a long address gives you a full set of information that you can have in there. So with a short address, you can have up to 128 different locomotive IDs, from 0 to 127. If you went for a long address, you could have right up to 9,999 if you wanted. And that gives you some great opportunities if you don't want to number your locomotives from 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on and so forth, which might get confusing if you have a few locomotives. You can start picking numbers from the side of the engines, especially those with under 5 digits, such as London, Midland, Scottish Railway locos with the 4 digits on the side of the cab. You can give them their full number and it makes it easier to remember. So the majority of controllers and the majority of decoders these days do handle the long address as well as the short address. And you can combine both systems if you have a loco with a short address and a loco with a long address on your layout. That will cause you no issues at all. But it's what you want to assign your locomotives, whatever your numbering system wants to be. Whether you're matching the numbers on the real life locomotives themselves, or you are matching the different numbers in your own system that you may have on a written down sheet of paper. So have a look at those. Again, if you're looking at the different configurations on there, have a look at the instructions in the manuals for the controllers you get on the exactities of how to assign either a short or long address. While we're looking at assigning things to decoders, have a bit of a look, because this is one area that a lot of people find really scary, but actually there's a heck of a lot you can do in there. And this is looking at the configuration variables, or the CVs of a locomotive. You can change pretty much anything about how the locomotive will operate. You can change the acceleration rate. You can change how fast it speeds up. You can change how fast it goes at the top speed. You can change how fast it goes at the middle speed on your controller. You can change how fast it deaccelerates. You can change a huge amount of different things, including a lot of settings on the lights and various other options. Some of them do get quite tricky, and there are some great guides out there online that you can take a look at if you really want to start digging in to the configuration variables, and it may be something we cover in a future video. But for today, I wanted to cover my top 3 because these are useful for any digital modeler to use and to give a go. So the first one I want to look at is the reset switch. So if you are experimenting with those CVs, you may have a loco that stopped working and you just want to try a quick fix to get it going again. This works with the majority of decoders that are available on the market. You need to set CV number 8 to a value of 8. Again, setting the CVs is similar to the addresses. It is slightly different on each controller, but every single controller comes with a comprehensive instruction guide on how to do that. But this CV8 to the value of 8 will give you a full reset. It will return your decoder to the factory settings. That works for a standard decoder, and it also works for a sound decoder too. But do bear in mind that with sound decoders, it won't wipe the sound files, but if you've put some specific settings regarding acceleration on there, it will take those away. So only use CV8 to 8 as a bit of a last resort, really. Any of the amendments you've made to the configuration variables will be removed and the decoder will be returned to factory settings. That is a good way of finding out a loco address. If you've bought a loco, maybe a second-hand item, maybe you've had a look in our pre-owned section for a great DCC bargain, who knows? Sometimes the address might not have been reset by the previous owner. It should go back to the default of number 3, but you can use that CV8 to 8 fix to fully return that and set it back to its original status. So have a look at that. The second one I want to show you is reversing the control of the loco. So sometimes, again, you can find that a loco has been set up incorrectly, or the decoder may have been installed the wrong way around. If it's quite a tricky fix to fix the decoder, or it's been hardwired in on an older locomotive, you can change CV29 in exactly the same way as we did with the CV8 previously. Again, have a look at the instructions on your decoder for that, and indeed in the controller there too. Now, this can depend between decoders, so give it a bit of an experiment. If it doesn't work, you can use the reset that we mentioned previously, and I'll just show you the code for that again so you can remember it. But with this, it will either be adding number 1 or taking 1 away from the value of CV29. So if CV29 is set at number 6, you will either make that number 7 or number 5. And it will change the direction that the loco runs in. So when you're driving forwards, it will work forwards instead of backwards. Again, that can differ between certain decoders, so just have a quick look at the instructions in your decoder before you give that one a go. But it is a great fix if you're having some issues with your loco and you don't want to do a full reset. Finally, this is for you DCC sound guys out there. As a couple of you have mentioned, this is a great fix for some of the volume settings that you can have. Whilst DCC sound does add a really great side to a layout, sometimes you'll find that certain locos are louder than others, and you really want to get the balance right on your layout so you can hear everything in perfect harmony. We're changing those CVs again, and this time we are on CV number 63. On a lock sound decoder, which you'll find fitted to most locomotives, these are set between 0 and 192. So do some experimenting on these figures to find a perfect volume for you. I really would recommend starting at the lower end of that scale, maybe 40, 50 or so, because what you may find on some decoders, if you go right to the top end of that setting and max the volume, you may find that the speaker can't quite handle it and it does start to distort. But again, if you want to return that sound speaker level to the factory settings, you can do our decoder reset, which on most decoders is the CV8 to the value of 8. One last little recommendation for you while we're talking about these configuration variables is the ability to check the manufacturer of a decoder too. If you read CV8 rather than set it, you will see that it comes up with a different number than the value of 8. It comes up with various different numbers dependent on what decoder you have inside it. A list of these is available online. If you compare the list of what comes up on your controller, varies against the list that you have online there. So again, if you've bought a loco secondhand, or you've found a decoder at the back of a drawer and you're not quite sure what make it is, you can put it in a locomotive or on a decoder tester and you can find out the specific make of it, which is really great if you're confirming a different type of sound decoder and making sure you've got the correct speaker for it. So that's my tips when we have a bit of a look at the different CVs that you can have, the configuration variables. As said, there's a huge amount there, but once you get into that length there, it really does cover down quite a few different things. So most of the controllers that we do sell right now can assign those configuration variables really, really easily, right from the Select from Hornby up through the NCE Power Card, the Hornby Elite, the Gauge Master controllers can do that too. So do take a look at that. I'll just answer a couple of questions from the chat whilst we're here too. I will put a couple of comments on there. So Adrian's got a great question there regarding picking up a controller for digital sound functions. Now, a lot of the controllers these days do handle the full suite of instructions and the functions up to function number 28. You'll certainly find that with the Elite. I believe the latest version of the Hornby Select does that too. With most sound decoders, you'll find it to go up to about function 20 to about function 25. So the majority of sound decoders can be controlled by the different controllers that we have available too. As is everything that I've mentioned here today when it comes to changing some of the CVs. And I would recommend a closer little look at that to give you some of the real variation, especially when it comes to acceleration rates, etc. But the items I've given you today are just a really quick summary of some of the more useful CV changes that you can make. I'll just give you a quick run through those again. You've got a full reset there. That just resets the decoder to the factory settings and gives you a fresh install on your decoder. If your loco's not performing as it should and it's working in reverse when it should be going forwards and you don't want to do a full reset, you can experiment here with a change of CV number 29. And if you're finding your loco is too loud or too quiet on digital sound, have a look at CV63. Anywhere between the values of 0 and 192 will change the volumes there. So hopefully some top tips for you beginners out there getting the decoders started. So do have a bit of a look. Check out what we've got available. We have a huge amount of different controllers available to you right at the moment. The link in the description, as ever, gives you the full information on the decoders we have and what locos match which decoders there too. So have a quick look and find out the information. Otherwise, if you have any further questions, please don't hesitate to get in touch with us, either via our customer experience team or leave a comment on the video, and I'll keep an eye on the questions in there after the stream too. Otherwise, I hope I've given you some DCC beginners, some real skills to pick up and make sure your collection is starting exactly as it should. If there's anything more you'd like to know, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and like our Facebook page for more SkillsCast videos where we cover some of the skills you need to transform your layout into a model railway. Otherwise, thanks again for watching and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.